She was just a little girl, with one last sandwich in her backpack. He was just a starving stray, shivering in the rain. But that tiny act of kindness would decide who lived and who might not see the morning. What happened that stormy night will break your heart and restore your faith in kindness. Welcome back to Hearts and Billions. Don't scroll, this story will change how you see kindness forever. Stay with us, please hit that subscribe button. Let's dive in. Mia was only 7 years old, but her heart seemed bigger than anyone else's in her small town. She lived in a faded blue house on Maple Street, where the paint peeled and the front steps creaked under her tiny feet each morning. Her mother worked long hours cleaning houses, and they never had much. But what little Mia had, she always wanted to share. Every night before bed, Mia would carefully pack her old, frayed backpack. She'd put in one peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper, the only lunch she could bring, and tuck in a shiny red apple if they had won that week. She always checked the backpack twice, making sure her sandwich was perfect, because she knew someone else might need it more than she did. Mia loved going to school, not because of the lessons, but because she could look for kids who looked sad or lonely. If she saw a classmate with an empty lunchbox, or one who sat alone, she would quietly sit next to them and share half her sandwich. She would smile and say, "You can have some." "I don't mind." Her voice was soft, but her kindness was loud enough for everyone to notice. Her teacher, Mrs. Jenkins, often watched Mia with tears welling up in her eyes. She would whisper to the classroom aide, "That child has a heart of gold. She gives even when she has nothing." Mia's clothes were often too small or patched at the knees. Her sneakers had holes that let the cold in when it rained, and her backpack straps were held together with safety pins. But Mia never complained. She would hum softly as she walked to school, skipping over cracks on the sidewalk, believing the world was a good place because kindness was free. At home, her mother would sometimes ask, "Mia, did you eat your lunch today?" And Mia would nod with a shy smile, not wanting to worry her mom. She knew her mother worked so hard, and Mia wanted her to believe everything was okay. That morning, the sky was gray, and a chilly breeze blew through the trees. Mia zipped her worn jacket all the way up, hugged her backpack to her chest, and stepped onto the street. She could feel her stomach growling already, but she felt proud because deep in her heart, she hoped her little sandwich would help someone who needed it even more than she did. School ended with dark clouds gathering overhead. Mia watched the gray sky through the classroom window as raindrops started to tap softly against the glass. By the time the final bell rang, a cold drizzle had turned into steady rain, soaking the playground and turning the dirt paths into muddy streams. Mia pulled her thin jacket tighter around her small shoulders. She had no umbrella, and her backpack was already damp at the corners. Still, she waved goodbye to Mrs. Jenkins with a bright smile. The teacher called out, "Be careful. Mia, it's getting worse out there." But Mia just nodded cheerfully and stepped outside. The cold rain felt sharp against her cheeks as she walked. Her shoes squished with every step, the holes at her toes filling with chilly water. She kept her eyes down, watching little rivers of rainwater flow along the cracked sidewalk. Her stomach rumbled loudly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten all day. The streets were quiet, except for the sound of thunder rolling in the distance. Trees bent in the gusty wind, and the few cars that passed sprayed water high into the air as they sped by. Mia shivered but kept going, determined to get home before dark. As she reached the corner of Elm and Pine, a sudden flash of lightning lit up the street, and thunder boomed so loudly it made her jump. She ducked into a narrow alley between two old brick buildings, hoping to find shelter for a moment. The rain dripped from her hair, soaking her backpack. She hugged it close to her chest, feeling its familiar weight and the sandwich inside. She took a deep breath to calm herself, even though she was alone in the rain. Mia felt brave. She had always believed the world was full of good surprises. But as the storm grew louder and the sky grew darker, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching her. Mia peeked out from the alley, ready to dash the last few blocks home. But as she stepped forward, she froze. There, crouched near an overflowing trash bin, was a dog, thin, soaked, and shivering. His fur was matted with mud and rain. His ribs showed through his patchy coat. His ears drooped low, and his tail was tucked tight under his belly. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. For a moment, Mia was afraid. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light of a flickering street lamp. But then she saw it, not anger, not aggression, just hunger and sadness. His dark eyes locked onto her backpack, as if he knew it held something that could save him. Mia's heart ached. She could almost hear his stomach growling over the rain. She stepped closer, carefully, not wanting to scare him. The dog whimpered softly but didn't run. His body trembled so badly he could barely stand. But he lifted his head, desperate for help. "Hi, puppy," Mia whispered, her voice as gentle as the falling rain. "You look so hungry." She looked around. There were no adults. No cars, no one else in the stormy street. It felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of them. A lonely little girl and a starving stray. Mia slowly slipped her backpack off her shoulders, careful not to make any sudden moves. She opened it with shaking fingers, rain dripping from her sleeves, and pulled out her only meal, the peanut butter sandwich wrapped in wax paper. She knelt down in the puddles, ignoring the cold water soaking her knees. The dog inched closer, eyes wide, nose twitching at the smell of food. His whole body seemed torn between fear and desperate hope. Mia's voice cracked as she said, "It's okay, you can have it." She laid the sandwich on the ground and slid it toward him with her small hand. The dog sniffed it, then looked back at her as if asking permission. Mia nodded through tears, and he began to eat, wolfing it down with frantic gratitude. Between bites, he lifted his eyes to her face, as if he understood that this was more than food. It was a gift of kindness. As thunder rumbled overhead, Mia smiled through the rain. In that dark, lonely alley, something warm and powerful passed between them, a silent promise that they wouldn't let each other face the storm alone. Mia watched the dog devour the sandwich in hungry, grateful gulps. Each bite made her stomach twist with both sadness and relief. Sadness that this was all she had to give, and relief that he finally had something in his empty belly. As he licked the last crumbs from the wax paper, the dog's eyes softened. He looked up at Mia with a gaze that seemed to say thank you without words. His tail thumped weakly against the wet pavement, the first wag of happiness he'd shown in who knows how long. Mia reached out a small, trembling hand. The dog hesitated, then inched closer until his cold, wet nose touched her fingers. His fur was rough and dirty, but she didn't care. She gently scratched behind his ears, feeling his bony head lean into her touch. "You're such a good boy," she whispered through chattering teeth. "You don't have to be alone anymore." Lightning flashed above them, and thunder crashed so loudly Mia jumped. The dog pressed against her side, as if trying to shield her from the storm. His body was thin but warm. She wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close. For a few seconds, the howl of the wind and the pounding rain faded away, replaced by the quiet comfort of two souls finding each other. Mia thought about the sandwich, her only meal of the day. Now gone, her stomach hurt from hunger, but her heart felt full. She remembered something her mother always said: "When you give to someone who needs it more, you're never truly empty." The rain grew heavier, drumming on the alley walls like 1,000 tiny hammers. Mia knew she couldn't stay much longer or she'd get sick. But as she stood, the dog stayed beside her, his eyes no longer desperate, but loyal, as if he had decided he would never leave her side again. She looked down at him and smiled, despite the cold water dripping from her hair. "I have to go home now," she said softly, "but I'll come back tomorrow, I promise." As Mia stepped out of the alley and into the storm, the dog watched her until she disappeared around the corner, the promise of friendship shining in his eyes, even brighter than the lightning flashing overhead. Mia hurried through the rain, but every few steps, she glanced over her shoulder. The dog stood at the edge of the alley, his eyes glowing softly in the stormy night. He didn't bark or whine, he just watched her, like he was memorizing the way she moved, as if he already cared for her more than anything else in the world. Every time she looked back, he was still there, a silent guardian in the dark. When Mia finally reached the corner near her street, she waved to him with her small hand. Lightning lit up his face for a brief second, and she thought she saw a spark of hope in his eyes. Then the rain swallowed him up. As Mia stepped onto her porch, shivering and soaked, she turned one last time. The dog was gone from view, but she felt his presence like a warm light in the cold night. She hugged her backpack to her chest, feeling the emptiness inside where her sandwich had been, but smiling because her heart felt fuller than ever. Inside, her mother was waiting with a worried face. "Mia, where have you been? You're drenched." She wrapped Mia in a thin towel, rubbing her arms to warm her up. Mia wanted to tell her everything about the hungry dog, about the way his eyes looked when he realized he was finally safe. But she hesitated. What if her mom said she couldn't see him again? So she simply whispered, "I'm okay. Mommy, I just took a little longer to get home." She looked down, thinking about the dog alone in the rain. That night, Mia lay awake in bed listening to the storm raging outside. Each rumble of thunder made her flinch, but she wasn't afraid for herself. She thought of the dog curled up somewhere cold and dark, and her heart ached with worry. She pressed her small hands together and prayed softly, "Please keep him safe tonight. I promise I'll find him again tomorrow." Meanwhile, in the shadows of the neighborhood, the dog lay under a sagging wooden porch, shivering but alive. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girl's smile, and somehow, it gave him the strength to face the night. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he belonged to someone. The morning after the storm, the sun peeked through tattered clouds, turning puddles into mirrors on the cracked sidewalks. Birds chirped softly, as if the whole world was breathing a sigh of relief. But Mia barely noticed the bright morning light. She only thought of one thing, the dog she had promised to find again. She slipped out of bed before her mother woke up, quickly pulling on her damp sneakers from the day before. Her backpack still smelled faintly of peanut butter, and she hugged it close like a shield. Today there was no sandwich inside, just a small piece of bread she saved from breakfast, hoping it might be enough to show the dog she hadn't forgotten him. Mia stepped outside. The world felt fresh and quiet after the storm, but puddles still reflected the gray sky, and branches littered the sidewalks. She walked quickly, her eyes scanning every alley and corner. Each barking dog in a backyard made her heart race with hope, but none of them were her dog. She hurried to the alley where she had first seen him. The trash bin was knocked over from the storm, old newspapers and soggy cardboard strewn everywhere. The space was empty, except for a single paw print in the mud, small but clear. She knelt and touched it gently, as if it were a message meant just for her. "I know you're out there," she whispered. "I'm going to find you, I promise." Mia checked behind buildings, under porches, and even behind the bushes along the schoolyard fence. With each empty spot, her worry grew. What if the dog had been hurt during the storm? What if someone had chased him away? But she refused to give up. She kept searching, her tiny hands gripping the straps of her backpack, so hard her knuckles turned white. Just when she thought she might burst into tears, Mia heard a faint whimper. She turned sharply, her heart leaping. There at the end of the block, near a big oak tree split by lightning, stood the dog. His fur was still dirty, but his eyes lit up the second he saw her. She ran to him, and he hobbled forward, his tail wagging with joy. Mia dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around his thin body. His tongue licked her cheeks, warm and grateful, washing away her fear. They stayed like that in the morning sun, two friends who had found each other again. "I told you I'd come back," she whispered into his fur, tears mixing with her smile. And in that quiet moment, under the broken tree, a promise of unbreakable friendship was sealed forever. That afternoon, dark clouds rolled back across the sky. The bright morning sun disappeared behind swirling gray, and the warm breeze turned cold. Leaves rustled in the growing wind, and Mia felt the first drops of rain splatter against her cheeks as she and the dog made their way toward her house. She looked up nervously. The clouds were heavy and low, swirling like angry waves in the sky. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance, growing louder with every minute. People hurried along the sidewalks, pulling coats tight and rushing home before the storm arrived. Doors slammed, windows clicked shut, and the quiet streets emptied as the first sheets of rain fell. Mia glanced down at the dog walking beside her. His ears were pinned back against his head, and his eyes darted nervously at each clap of thunder. She knelt next to him, wrapping her arms around his damp, shivering body. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own voice shook. "We'll get through this together." She thought about taking him home, but fear crept in. What if her mom didn't understand? What if the landlord said dogs weren't allowed? What if they had to give him away? The thought made Mia's stomach twist in knots. Another crack of thunder echoed across the neighborhood. The dog whimpered, pressing closer to her. Mia felt his body trembling and knew they couldn't stay out here. She looked around desperately for somewhere safe, anywhere they could hide from the wind and rain. She spotted an old, boarded-up shed behind a row of empty houses. The door hung crookedly, swaying in the gusts. Mia pulled the dog with her, slipping inside just as the rain turned into a wild downpour. The door banged shut behind them, and the small space filled with the sound of rain hammering the tin roof. The air was damp and smelled like old wood, but it was dry. Mia sat on the floor with the dog curled tightly against her side. Each time thunder crashed, he jumped, and she'd wrap her arms around him tighter. "It's okay," she kept repeating softly, rocking him like a baby. "I'm right here, I won't leave you." The storm outside roared louder, rattling the shed's walls, but inside, Mia's gentle words and the dog's warm, trusting eyes created a small island of safety. Even though the world outside felt scary and uncertain, they had each other, and that made them both a little braver. By the time the storm passed, night had already fallen. The streets glistened with puddles reflecting the dim glow of streetlights, and the air smelled of wet earth and fresh rain. Mia peeked out of the old shed, Holding the dog close, the neighborhood was quiet, but an uneasy darkness settled over everything. Mia's stomach growled painfully. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, and her legs felt weak from hunger and exhaustion. She knew she had to get home soon, or her mother would worry. She stood and looked down at the dog, his tired eyes meeting hers. He was trembling, his fur still damp and cold. He needed a safe place, but so did she. "I have to go home," she whispered, her voice cracking, "but I don't want to leave you alone." As they stepped out of the shed, Mia scanned the street, hoping for a sign of her mother's car. But the road was empty. She started walking quickly, hugging the dog at her side. Each shadow seemed to move. Each creak of a tree branch made her heart race. The dark felt deeper and scarier than ever before. Halfway home, the streetlights flickered and went out, leaving the road in near darkness. Mia gasped, grabbing the dog's scruffy neck for comfort. She could barely see a few feet in front of her. The only sounds were the soft splashes of their feet in puddles, and the distant hum of the storm moving away. A sudden rustling came from a narrow alley up ahead. Mia stopped, her breath caught in her throat. A dark shape shifted near the dumpsters. She couldn't make out who or what it was. She took a small step backward, clutching the dog tighter. "Stay calm, just stay calm," she whispered to herself. Though tears stung her eyes, her mind spun with fear. What if someone bad was hiding there? What if they tried to hurt her? The dog felt her fear and pressed closer. His ears pricked, a low growl rumbling in his chest. His body was thin, but his presence felt big. Like a shield around her, Mia wiped her tears, trying to be brave for both of them. She thought of her mother waiting at home, probably pacing the living room. She thought of the promise she made to the dog, to never let him feel alone again. Taking a deep breath, she squeezed the dog gently and stepped forward. "We can do this," she whispered, her voice firmer than she felt. "We have to get home." But deep down, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was waiting in the darkness. Something that would test both her courage and the bond she had formed with her new friend. Mia's heart pounded as she stepped closer to the alley. The wind had died down, but the darkness felt thick and heavy, pressing in around her. She could hear the soft drip-drip of water falling from the roofs above, echoing in the empty street like a ticking clock. Each drop made her flinch. She squeezed the dog's scruffy fur for courage. His growl stayed low and steady, vibrating under her fingers like a warning. Mia took a deep breath, trying to calm the fear swirling in her chest. Suddenly, a tall, shadowy figure stepped out from behind the dumpster. The man's face was hidden under a hood, but Mia could feel his eyes on her, cold and sharp. His boots splashed in a puddle as he took a step forward. "What are you doing out here, little girl?" The man's voice was rough, cutting through the silence. Mia's voice caught in her throat. She couldn't answer, fear had frozen her like ice. The man stepped closer, and the dog barked loudly, his growl rising into a fierce snarl. Mia felt his body tense like a coiled spring. The man paused, then lunged forward, grabbing Mia's arm with a dirty, rough hand. Mia cried out, stumbling backward. The man's grip was strong and painful, his fingers digging into her skin. "Let me go," she screamed, her voice high and desperate. She twisted and kicked, but he held on tightly. The dog exploded into action, launching himself at the man with a savage bark. His teeth sank into the man's coat. Tearing at the thick fabric, the man cursed, swinging his arm wildly, trying to shake the dog off. The alley filled with the sounds of growls, shouts, and Mia's frightened sobs. Lightning flashed in the distance, lighting up the alley for a split second. Mia saw the dog's eyes, wild, determined, fearless. He was fighting for her with everything he had. The man lost his balance, stumbling backward. The dog refused to let go, snarling louder. The man kicked at him, but the dog dodged, biting again and again, forcing him away from Mia. Mia fell to her knees, gasping for breath. Her arm burned where the man had grabbed her. She watched, eyes wide with terror and awe, as her skinny, scrappy friend defended her like the bravest knight. Another flash of lightning lit up the man's face, twisted with rage and fear. He glanced around the empty street, realized neighbors might soon hear the noise, and cursed loudly. He gave the dog one last shove, then turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing into the maze of alleys. Mia reached out with shaking hands. The dog turned to her immediately, tail wagging weakly, blood on his muzzle from a small cut but eyes full of relief. She wrapped her arms around him, crying into his wet fur. "You saved me. You really saved me." She sobbed, rocking back and forth in the dark alley while rain began to fall once more, mingling with her tears. Mia clung to the dog as the last echoes of the man's footsteps faded into the dark. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. Her face was wet with rain and tears, and she could barely catch her breath. But the dog stood firm in front of her, chest heaving, eyes alert like a small, scrappy hero who would fight the whole world to keep her safe. The street was empty and silent again, except for the soft patter of fresh rain. Mia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked down at her protector. His fur was matted, his thin body trembling from exhaustion and fear. But his eyes never left hers. In them she saw something deeper than loyalty. She saw love. "You're my hero," Mia whispered, her voice small and shaky. She hugged him tightly, feeling his warmth steady her shivers. The dog let out a soft whine, nuzzling her cheek as if to say he was just happy she was okay. Suddenly, a bright light swept across the alley. A car turned the corner, headlights illuminating the two of them huddled on the wet ground. The car stopped abruptly, tires skidding in a puddle. The door flew open, and Mia's mother came running, hair wild, face pale with panic. "Mia," she screamed, dropping to her knees beside her daughter. She wrapped Mia in her arms, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. "Oh, my baby, what happened? I was so scared." Mia buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Sobbing with relief, she pointed a trembling hand at the dog, who stood a few feet away, head low and tail wagging hesitantly. "He saved me, Mommy. He saved my life," Mia choked out between sobs. Her mother looked at the dog, her eyes softening as she took in his ragged appearance. She reached out a cautious hand. The dog sniffed it, then licked her fingers gently. Mia's mother pulled him into the hug, wrapping one arm around the shivering animal. "Thank you," she whispered to the dog, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for bringing my little girl back to me." In that moment, under the glow of headlights and the soft rain, three hearts beat together: a mother, her daughter, and the stray dog who had become their hero. Mia's mother scooped her up, holding her close as she carried her down the slick sidewalk toward home. But each time Mia looked back, the dog followed a few steps behind, limping slightly, his eyes never leaving her. He moved carefully, head low, as if worried he might be chased away. When they reached their small front yard, Mia's mom hesitated. She glanced at the dog, thin, soaked and bleeding from a small cut above his eye. He stood shivering in the rain, eyes pleading for permission to stay. "Mommy, please," Mia begged, voice hoarse. "He saved me. He can't stay outside." Her mother looked at the dog, then at Mia's tear-streaked face. The weight of the night, the storm, the fear, the miracle of her daughter coming home safe, settled on her shoulders. With a shaky breath, she stepped aside and waved the dog forward. "Come on, boy," she said softly. The dog hesitated, then trotted up the steps, slipping once on the wet wood but catching himself. Mia's mom pushed open the creaky door, and all three stepped into the small living room. The old heater rattled in the corner. Fighting the damp chill, the dog shook himself, spraying water across the floor. But Mia just giggled through her exhaustion. As soon as Mia's mom set her down, she knelt beside the dog and inspected his cuts. "He needs help, Mommy," Mia whispered urgently. Her mom nodded, rushing to the kitchen. She came back with warm water, an old towel, and a box of bandages. Gently, she wiped the dog's muddy fur and cleaned the cuts, whispering comforting words the whole time. The dog flinched at first, but soon relaxed under her careful touch, his eyes fluttering with trust. Mia sat close, one hand resting on his paw. Each time he whimpered, she whispered, "You're so brave, it's okay." She remembered how fiercely he had fought for her, how he had leapt at the man, teeth flashing, risking everything to protect a girl he had only just met. The dog's breathing finally slowed, his eyes drooping from exhaustion. His tail wagged faintly each time Mia spoke. It felt like he understood every word. Outside, thunder rumbled one last time in the distance. Inside, the small house glowed with warm light, and the air buzzed with something stronger than fear: love. In that quiet moment, Mia realized they weren't just two lonely souls anymore. They were a team, a family, and they had survived the night together. The dog lay curled up on an old blanket near the heater, his breathing steady but ragged. Mia's mother brought him a bowl of warm broth and set it carefully on the floor. The dog lifted his head, sniffed, and then began to lap it up eagerly, his eyes closing with relief at each mouthful. Mia sat beside him, one hand gently stroking his muddy fur. "See, you're safe now," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but it trembled with all the fear, gratitude, and love bottled up inside her. A loud knock rattled the front door, making Mia jump. Her mother rushed to open it. Standing there were two neighbors, Mr. Hernandez from next door and Mrs. Ellis from across the street, both breathless, faces pale from worry. "We heard shouting in the alley," Mr. Hernandez said urgently. "Is everything all right? We called the police, but we wanted to check on you." Mia's mother pulled the door open wider, relief flooding her face. "Thank you." We're okay now. Mia's safe thanks to him. She nodded to the dog curled up inside. The neighbors stepped in, eyes widening as they saw the scruffy dog lying protectively near Mia. Mrs. Ellis gasped softly, hands flying to her mouth. That's the stray that's been wandering near the school. She whispered, I never thought he'd be the one to save a child. Just then, a pair of flashing lights reflected off the rain-slick street as a police cruiser pulled up. Officer Daniels, a kind-faced man with a gray mustache, stepped out and approached the house. Evening, folks, he called out, voice calm but firm. We got reports of a man attacking a girl. Is everyone safe? Mia's mother nodded quickly. My daughter is okay. Thanks to this dog, he chased the man off. Officer Daniels stepped inside, his eyes softening as he looked at Mia hugging the dog. He crouched down to their level. That's one brave pup you've got there, he said gently. Mia beamed through tears, pressing her face into the dog's fur. He's my hero, she whispered. The officer patted her shoulder. And you're a brave girl, too. We'll patrol the neighborhood tonight. That man won't come back. Neighbors offered blankets, flashlights, and comforting words. The small house buzzed with quiet conversations, the warmth of community filling the room like sunlight after a storm. The dog lifted his head, eyes calm for the first time in days, as if he knew he had finally found where he belonged. Mia's mother looked around the room, at the neighbors standing guard, the police officer taking notes, and her daughter safe in her arms, and felt a deep, grateful peace. They weren't alone anymore. The neighbors gradually drifted back to their homes, and Officer Daniels left with a promise to check in the next morning. The small house grew quiet again, the only sounds the ticking of the old clock on the wall, and the gentle crackle of the heater working overtime to chase away the damp chill. Mia sat cross-legged on the floor beside the dog, who had finally drifted into a peaceful sleep. His breathing was deep and steady, his ribs rising and falling like a lullaby. She reached out and brushed a lock of hair from his face, tears welling in her eyes. I was so scared, she whispered, her voice cracking. I thought I'd never see Mommy again, but you saved me. Her mother knelt beside her, pulling her into a warm, protective hug. You were so brave. Mia, she murmured, kissing her forehead. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so thankful he found you when he did. Mia looked up at her mom, tears streaming down her cheeks. Can he stay with us, please? Mommy, I don't want him to ever feel alone again. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, too. She reached out and gently stroked the dog's fur, feeling the thinness of his body, the warmth of his trust. He's already part of our family. Sweetheart, she said softly, voice shaking, he belongs here now. A sob of relief escaped Mia's chest. She threw her arms around her mother's neck, hugging her tightly as tears of gratitude poured down her face. The dog stirred, opening his eyes just enough to see them, then let out a contented sigh as he settled back into sleep. In that small living room, everything felt different. The house still had peeling wallpaper, squeaky floors, and a leaky faucet in the kitchen, but it was filled with something more important than anything money could buy. Safety, love, and a bond that nothing could break. Mia leaned down to the dog's ear and whispered, I love you, hero. I'll never let you go. Her mother placed a gentle hand on both of them, her own tears falling. For the first time in a long while, the house felt like a home, warm, safe, and whole. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, turning the old table into a patch of glowing gold. The air was crisp but gentle after the storm, and birds sang softly outside, as if welcoming a new beginning. Mia woke up curled next to the dog on a blanket near the heater. His warm body rose and fell with each calm breath. She reached out and stroked his fur, smiling as his eyes opened, and his tail gave a sleepy wag. Good morning, hero, she whispered, the name feeling perfect on her tongue. The dog lifted his head, licking her hand gently as if he understood he had a new name and a new life. In the kitchen, Mia's mother poured hot chocolate into 2 chipped mugs. She watched them from the doorway, her heart swelling with love. She still remembered the terror of the night before, but it felt like a distant storm compared to the peace filling the small house now. After breakfast, they took the dog outside to the front porch, where the morning light danced on puddles. Neighbors came by one, bringing small gifts, a bag of dog food, an old leash, a soft blanket. Each person knelt down to greet Hero, smiling and scratching his ears. Hero wagged his tail, eyes bright and trusting. Mrs. Ellis handed Mia a shiny red collar with a small silver tag. Every hero deserves a name everyone can know, she said with a wink. Mia's mother helped her buckle the collar around his neck. The tag jingled softly, engraved with the word hero, and their address proof that he finally had a place to belong. Mia hugged him tightly. You're part of our family now. Forever, she said, her voice trembling with happiness. Hero's eyes glistened in the sunlight as he looked up at Mia and her mother. He let out a joyful bark, spinning in a clumsy circle that made everyone laugh. He seemed to know he was home, truly home, and that he would never have to face the world alone again. Later that day, Mia and her mother took Hero for a walk through the neighborhood. As they passed by, people smiled and waved, pointing at the brave dog who had saved a little girl's life. Some patted Hero on the head. Others called out, "Good boy," or "That's a real hero." With each step, Mia felt stronger, safer, and happier. She held Hero's new leash proudly, knowing that not only had she saved him with her kindness, but he had saved her right back. Word about Mia and Hero spread quickly through the small town. By the end of the week, nearly everyone knew the story of the brave little girl who shared her last sandwich with a stray dog, and how that dog had saved her life on the stormy night. At the grocery store, people stopped Mia and her mother to ask how Hero was doing. The librarian gave Mia a free book about dogs, winking as she said, "For the town's little hero and his best friend." The mayor even sent a letter thanking Hero for his bravery, calling him an example of courage and loyalty. But the best part was how Mia's kindness seemed to change everyone around her. Families who had never paid much attention to the strays wandering near the edge of town began leaving bowls of food and fresh water outside their doors. Children in Mia's class collected old blankets and toys, bringing them to the animal shelter so other dogs like Hero wouldn't feel alone or unloved. One Saturday morning, Mia and her mother stood outside the shelter with Hero by their side. A line of neighbors waited patiently to adopt dogs and cats who had been there for weeks. Even months, smiles and warm greetings filled the air. And for the first time, the shelter workers were busy in the happiest way. Mia knelt beside Hero, hugging him as people walked by and thanked them for inspiring the town. "You did this," she whispered to him, her voice thick with emotion. "We did this together." Hero's tail thumped happily on the ground, his eyes shining with love. He licked Mia's cheek, and she giggled, wiping away tears she didn't even realize were falling. Later, as they walked home, Mia looked up at her mother. "Mommy," she asked softly, "do you think kindness really can make the whole world better?" Her mother smiled, pulling Mia close. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm and sure. "It starts with one small act, like a girl sharing her last sandwich, like a dog risking everything for his friend. That's how it begins." They stepped through their front door, Hero trotting happily inside. The old house felt brighter than ever before, not because the walls were new, but because it was filled with love, hope, and the unbreakable bond of a girl and her hero. Months passed, and the town never forgot Mia and Hero's story. On warm afternoons, neighbors would see them walking side by side, Mia's laughter floating on the breeze, while Hero trotted proudly, his red collar shining in the sun. Every morning, Hero waited at the door for Mia to finish breakfast so they could walk to school together. He greeted each child at the gate with a friendly wag, and soon, even kids who were afraid of dogs felt safe around him. Teachers smiled as they watched Mia share not just her lunch, but her courage and kindness with everyone. At home, Hero had his own soft bed by the heater, a shiny bowl with his name on it, and a family who loved him more than anything. But what he cherished most were the gentle hands that stroked his fur, the bedtime whispers that promised he'd never be alone, and the girl who had taught him what it meant to be loved. And so, in a little town that had once hurried past hungry strays, people now looked twice. They noticed the quiet ones who needed kindness most. They remembered that sometimes, the simplest act like sharing a sandwich could change a life, or even save one. Hero and Mia showed everyone that love doesn't need grand gestures or big words. It just needs a heart brave enough to care. And every night, as Mia drifted off to sleep with Hero curled up beside her, they both dreamed of a world where every lost soul could find a friend, and every friend could become a hero. Loved this story? Hit like, subscribe, and share the kindness.